There's an isolated speck of land in the middle of a Siberian river called Nazino Island. While it's relatively empty today, it was once the setting for one of the most horrifying chapters in Soviet history. A chapter so gruesome it earned the island the infamous moniker, Cannibal Island. In May 1933, over 6,000 Soviet prisoners were sent to Nazino Island to construct a settlement as part of Joseph Stalin's network of gulags. Overcrowded on the island, which was less than 2 miles long and about 2,000 feet wide, and without shelter, food, or tools, the prisoners were forced to turn to extreme and violent measures in order to survive. Within just 3 days, many prisoners started to turn to cannibalism. But first, the story of Cannibal Island begins with Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. After he took power following the death of Vladimir Lenin, Stalin vastly expanded the network of Soviet gulags, labor camps where his government could send anyone seen as undesirable or a threat to his power. These camps served a dual purpose. Not only did they remove undesirables from Soviet society, but they could also, in theory, create self-sustaining communities in far-flung corners of the Soviet Union that people wouldn't usually go. Nazino Island was one of these places chosen for settlement, but the mixture of people forced to go was strange. The people sent to Nazino Island were a mix of criminals, the unemployed, or just innocent civilians who'd been arrested for not having the proper paperwork. In May 1933, the first boatload of Soviet prisoners arrived at Nazino Island. Though some 24 had died during the voyage, about 3,000 had survived. They were dumped on the island's shores with no food, no tools, and nowhere sheltered to sleep. Despite this, the boats kept coming, and the island's population soon swelled to more than 6,000. It has been reported that almost 300 people didn't survive the first frigid night, and flour, given to the prisoners by their Soviet guards, only made things worse. The prisoners had no ovens or tools, so some mixed it with dirty river water and died of dysentery. Others ate it raw and suffocated on the powder. Sadly, it took just a few days for the prisoners to start turning to cannibalism. Some prisoners chose to eat those that were about to die anyway, feeling that was the best option. Other prisoners chose to tie up people and hack off parts one by one, all while the person was still living. One account describes how a woman, who was the lover of a camp guard named Kostya, was gruesomely murdered and eaten by prisoners on Cannibal Island. Described like a horde of zombies, a group of prisoners tied her to a poplar tree, cut off her breasts, her muscles, everything they could eat, and when Kostya the guard returned, he found her still alive, ripped to pieces, literally. He tried to save her, but she had lost too much blood. Many tried to flee Cannibal Island, but few made it very far. If their crude rafts didn't sink immediately into the river, they were shot by guards who hunted them for sport. And even if they did make it to the opposite bank, they had to survive the harsh Siberian wilderness alone. Of the more than 6,000 people who were sent to Nazino Island, only around 2,000 were still alive by the time the island was evacuated in July. That month, the survivors were sent to other labor camps, but only a handful of them were in working condition, and almost all were physically and psychologically scarred. Once Cannibal Island was evacuated and shut down, Soviet official Vasily Velichko interviewed dozens of people and sent his report to his superiors. Some of the Nazino Island camp guards were briefly imprisoned, but the truth about the island was hidden from the public for decades. The horrors of what happened on Cannibal Island finally came to light in 1994. Today, a group of locals travel to the island to lay flowers at the base of a wooden cross every year. They hope to honor the memories of the people who violently lost their lives on the horror that was Cannibal Island. As we leave the haunting shores of Nazino Island behind, we're reminded that the horrors of the past, no matter how distant, continue to echo through time. Nazino Island, known to history as Cannibal Island, stands as a grim monument to the human capacity for cruelty when compassion is stripped away by ideology and power. It's a story that demands to be told, remembered, and learned from, so that the horrors of Cannibal Island remain, forever, a relic of a bygone era, never to be repeated.